One day, I put a headset on and there's a heart there, and I could walk inside the heart. Like the heart was 1 story tall. I could pull on the valves, I could see where the blood moved through, I could walk through the chambers of the heart, and it's just straight away, well, it's a no-brainer. Like I've learnt my whole nursing career out of a textbook, and here I am physically touching and surrounded contextually by the content that was otherwise words. And then the real kicker is that while I'm in there, anyone from around the world could join me in that environment. I could high-five them. So this virtual classroom is untapped.
Before we get started, the team here at the Coast and Commerce podcast want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where this podcast is created, the Kabi Kabi and Jinnabara people. We honour their rich culture of storytelling as we share the inspiring stories of business leaders across the Sunshine Coast. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Let's get on with the show. G'day and welcome back to the Coast and Commerce podcast. I'm Ben Amos from Innovate Media, and this is the podcast where we bring inspiring stories from the Sunshine Coast to help you in whatever you do in business here on the coast. And one of those inspiring stories that I first come across a number of years ago, doing some really cool stuff actually in the world of technology and startup and all sorts of cool stuff that we're going to dive into here today, is Brad Chesham from Bundle of Rays. Brad, welcome to the show.
How are we doing? Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining me. Like I kind of teased there, you do some interesting stuff. And the name Bundle of Rays, the name of your company, I think a lot of people immediately like, okay, I have no idea what you do.
Bundle of Rays, sunshine, or...
Right, it sounds very happy.
We could probably start there. So I'm a nurse, been nursing for 20 years. When I graduated, I worked in cardiothoracics, which is heart-lung transplants, essentially. So in Sydney, I looked after people who got mechanical hearts. And there's a few things in nursing that nurses need to learn. And it's the heart monitoring, the ECG or the telemetry that you see on the, Grey's Anatomy that they look at the monitor. Yeah. And there's one thing on there called a bundle branch. And that is how the electricity travels through the heart. And it's something nurses struggle with, and it's very spatial. And the other thing in cardiothoracics is chest x-rays. Nurses find it very difficult to analyse chest x-rays, although we look at them every single day. So there's these two really difficult things that we try and learn, bundle branch and chest x-rays. And I was teaching them extensively. So Bundle of Rays is how I got the name. So
when you started the company there, were you working in this technology space, this AR and XR that we're going to dive into here today a little bit? Or was it just in physical, just teaching in the old school methodologies? Yeah,
I just worked as a nurse in intensive care at the end of the bed looking after patients, and it really started in England. I had a blog and I used to teach face-to-face classes with pen and paper, and some of the concepts are really difficult to deconstruct. You're talking about things inside the body, and there's relationships geographically and electrically, and trying to deconstruct that can be difficult to teach. So then I got into I worked as a lecturer, I've done a master's, I've done research papers. And while I was in England, a few of my friends worked in art. They also worked for Amazon and sort of this weird design world. I read a lot of graphic novels. And that's how I sort of got into virtual reality originally. Which is a range of technologies. There's extended reality, which is the most common term now that the industry seems to have settled on, as XR as a descriptor. But it's really a range from augmented reality, people might know as Pokemon Go, or if you use Google Map now, there's a whole range of AR, and then to a complete digital simulated environment, which is VR. So long story, one day I put a headset on and there's a heart there. And I could walk inside the heart. Like the heart was 1 story tall. I could pull on the valves. I could see where the blood moved through. I could walk through the chambers of the heart, and it's just straight away, well, it's a no-brainer. Like I've learnt my whole nursing career out of a textbook, and here I am physically touching and surrounded contextually by the content that was otherwise words. And then the real kicker is that while I'm in there, anyone from around the world could join me in that environment. I could high-five them. So this virtual classroom is untapped. So then I had to figure out being an intensive care nurse and then how to build a business.
Yeah. So you mentioned that kind of, I guess, aha moment of walking into that heart, having that experience in that virtual reality or XR space there. And was that the immediate foundation of your business? You're like, I need to transition into this, or was there a bit of a process of like working out what was possible, or if you were even able to do that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think immediately understood that from a sense of awe that this has a place for education. Then to take that into a business, like a lot of ideas, I just translated it from what I did and then tried to do what I traditionally have done. I tried to do that in virtual reality. So I'm in a classroom, there's 12 people, I put some headsets and I taught for 6 hours, but maybe 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon was using virtual reality to... But the truth is, first principles, I shouldn't be just translating traditional into the real world. And we stepped back from that. Plus my wife, she got the shits because I was traveling around teaching these courses all the time. So the business model when you've got babies at home of traveling to Melbourne and Darwin and was, do we really need to do this in person? Because I can put a headset on in Sunshine Coast. Somebody in Uganda can put a headset on, but we're standing next to each other, high five, and I can give them things and we can get post-it notes and draw. And so then this is probably 3 years ago, we just completely rechanged the business to essentially present the future of e-learning. So virtual education, but you're not clicking and scrolling. You're using your hands and walking around. So a tangible way to deliver vocational training.
Yeah. I think, anyone who's had an experience in some sort of AR environment, headsets and goggles, that sort of thing, that moment of, first really understanding having your eyes open to the possibilities here, even if it's just a gaming kind of experience initially or some sort of experiential thing. I think everyone has had that moment if you've been in that situation where you're like, okay, this is mind-blowing in some way. Sometimes it's a little bit unnerving. Sometimes, you get a bit dizzy and things like that. But I think everyone that I've spoken to who's had that experience has realised there's something here and it's the future of something, right? Yeah. And you kind of had that, but then applied that into, a real world use case that you've built a business around, right? And you said that was about 3 years ago.
So I probably had the business about 5 years, but we sort of transformationally changed the business about 3 years ago, yeah.
What were some of the early challenges? Because that was on the Sunshine Coast at that time. You were now on the coast. Yep. And what were some of the early challenges of, I guess, you kind of disrupting in a way or trying to disrupt the traditional way that medical education was being delivered? Is it something that as soon as people whack on the headset and they try it, they're like converted? They're like, this is the way to do it? Or has there been some pushback or some challenges, some objections to that?
I call healthcare concrete.
Okay. It's like bashing your head against the wall.
Well, as much as you might be a director at a hospital or a dean of a university, the truth is innovation in healthcare doesn't happen easily and it's not a corporate deal. I can't just walk in and say, hey, check out this. They go, wow, this is cool. Here, let's train the staff. It just doesn't happen like that from a procurement process. So, government systems have checks and balances. Universities have checks and balances. All of them are very, very slow. So, being a startup in my space with that client B2B sale, it's concrete. You really have to, a lot of the narrative I get from clients is, what's the evidence? And that proof takes time. It's there, right? And cyber sickness you mentioned and some of the barriers just make it easy for people to maintain institutional inertia. Yes, absolutely I'm disrupting. Like the simulation market, for example, there's mannequins, there's a whole range of simulation methodologies, and these new technologies just require a headset and a bit of Wi-Fi. So there's a dramatic reduction in cost and accessibility, but they haven't just overtaken the market, and that's fair enough. And because we're not going to replace the gold standard, but the pace at which that happens and how healthcare manages risk is concrete. The risk management, because I bang on about this all the time. I did an innovation fellowship with the Ohio State University in the US, which is one of our customers, and we do projects with them. They're in the top 5 nursing schools in America. And in that fellowship, we really explored what is innovation in healthcare. And the truth is, it's really hard to understand. People love talking about it. It's a little bit like accelerator programs. People will advertise accelerator programs, but what they never advertise is the KPIs 12 months after that accelerator program is finished and what those companies are then doing. Because if there's investment in innovation, that's good. We can talk about it. But what is the actual real world impact of innovation? Because I hate the word innovation. Change management or disruption or, growth or something like that is good, but innovation just gets a title of, ideas rather than actions.
Yeah.
And it's the actions in an industry like healthcare that they really care about. So, we can have these big government systems that have innovation programs. What does that mean? What does that mean for the nurse that's on the ward and the respiratory ward at 10 o'clock at night? How does that touch her on the shoulder and change her professional life? That's what I love digging into. That's sort of our core business of how do we help Jenny, this nurse, have a better job, be more satisfied, want to go to work and help her patients. Because if she does that, well, then the healthcare system just gets transformed.
Well, what you've kind of touched on there is something that's come up quite a bit on this podcast, particularly in the latest season, in season 4, where we've talked a lot about innovation on the coast, and the Sunshine Coast is potentially being this hub of innovation and startup ecosystems and things like that. But in my experience, in startups it's not just about the big idea. Often it's kind of thought about as like just have a big idea, a disruptive idea, an idea that has potential to take over the world, right? Which potentially AR and XR and VR in health education is a big idea, that there's a lot of potential there. But the reality of startup is often in the execution, right? That's where the rubber hits the road or the real struggles happen. So can you talk us through some of that? Like you have the big idea. Mm-hmm. What's been the journey over the last few years of actually getting that idea executed in a way that builds a sustainable business?
Yeah. The innovation of using an immersive environment to teach a nurse something is awesome.
Yeah.
It's the business model that's the real innovation of how do you do. There's 29 million nurses in the world. There's 400,000 registered nurses in Australia. How does that idea impact Jenny at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday to make her better? How do I sell this product to Queensland Health or New South Wales Health, and how do then they incorporate it? How do they deploy it? So the business model, the innovation of, let's have a subscription model, or, that is the real innovation. That's what I feel like. I've done 5 MBAs being a startup founder. Like I hate the concept of startups and the industry. It's the education that goes into, and the sweat, the tears, the fights with my wife, the time away from my children of how do you mold this so you can work with government, which isn't always easy. The workflows can be challenging, and then scale that. That's the real innovation for sure. And there's mentors which have been amazing. There's a lot on the coast. I have to give a big shout out to Ron Hill. He's been incredible for me personally and professionally. And that's one good thing about the coast is there are people sitting around the Sunshine Coast that give their time to help people like me and small businesses, which is very admirable. Because without those snippets of information or guidance or advice, in the dark times of sales dropping out and thinking, stuff this, it's a good idea, but, it's not going to happen, is you need the persistence and the grit to drive it forward. And sort of, you have to sacrifice. My sacrifice has been my health, just working nonstop. It's better to be obsessed with work than alcohol, right? But being able to be away from I lived in Korea for 4 months, for God's sake. So I was on an accelerator program there. There was 3,000 applicants. We got in the top 50. So I got paid to go and live in Seoul for 4 months, and we ended up coming 6th out of 3,000 companies, which was amazing. But I had a 2-year-old kid at home that I was going to chase this, and so that balance of working out where the real opportunity is, and not just chasing every opportunity, and having the space usually comes down to raising some money and having that. And we haven't done that. We have done some pre-seed money, but we haven't sort of jumped into any big investment yet. We are currently under due diligence going through an investment round. But we've been very cautious in the timing of our technology. So AI is obviously rampant, and it's got the trend. But people still don't understand the use cases. Most people think AI is ChatGPT. So just understanding the deepness to these business models, not the products, is where we really want to sit. So sort of to get to the crux of your question is the mental health balance of work-life, relationships, like friends. I don't see my friends a lot. They're amazing. They call me, check in on me. Hey, how's your thing going? Good, great. Talk to you soon. Then the innovation of the business model, and then the mobilization of the sales is the real thing that I've learned as a as a nurse, you know,
Yeah.
if you needed to go to the toilet, Ben, I can help you out. I've done that 1,000 times. If you had a cardiac arrest, I wouldn't even be that stressed about it. But sitting down, trying to write up a contract for, you know, $500,000 deal, that's, you know, what I've learned.
Yeah. So I'm interested to explore that further because, you know, there are a lot of businesses on the coast, whether they consider themselves a startup or an early stage business or, trying to get an idea off the ground. And I think you do tend to throw yourself, particularly when you're passionate about an idea and you feel that there's something here, you tend to throw yourself at it, right? And sometimes throw more than you have at it, financially, you know, health, mentally, all of that sort of stuff, right? What would you say if you were to think back to Brad 3, 4, 5 years ago? If you were to mentor yourself now, what would you be saying to that Brad starting out? Would you say, don't do it? Or would you say something else?
No, I definitely wouldn't say don't do it. Focus is a big thing. Focus until it's done. Chasing opportunities in a startup of just getting sales. You know, we've really matured. I've hired staff now who are full-time sales. So, you know, I need to earn money. So get people to earn money for you, give me a bit of space to then do, you know, so the focus after 5 years is good, where we've got a lineup, a pipeline of sales, and the CRM is filled out. We know exactly month to month where we want to go. And, you know, we're a team of 1 or 3 for the first 4 years. So, you know, we sort of $0 to $1 million revenue, and then to go from $1 million to 10 million of what that looks like is giving the right attention to the right person or project at the right time. You know, that's kind of like, hey, good advice, Brad. What the hell does that mean? But I would just follow your gut to try and stay to your core business and just drive that every day of the week rather than jumping over to do something just because it's 10 grand and get a bit of cash in the bank.
Yeah, and you touched on mental health and work-life balance and balancing family and business and all of that there as well. How would you mentor yourself in that way? Like, is there balance? Is there something to be found there?
It's a bit of bullshit, isn't it? You know, balance. I don't even know what that means. What am I going to do? I meditate every day. I try and exercise. I think, and everybody's different. We've got different personality traits. There's no balance if, you know, the goal that I've set for myself is to have a global business and to do that in a 3 to 5 year trajectory. How am I going to have a balanced life if I'm not out knocking on doors and talking to executives and deans and vice chancellors? You know, I can't have balance, you know, and unless I have some generational wealth where I've got $250,000 in the bank that gives me the breathing space to get that balance and drive the business, then, you know, my dad grew up in a coal mine and we had no cash, and I think me and my eldest brother, 2 of the only gone to university out of our family, so it's not like I've got that breathing space. So the advice I'd give, you know, just surround yourself with people that care for you. I think that's probably the biggest thing is, you know, my wife is far and away the stalwart of my mental health. Literally, she'll just, Brad, sort yourself out. You know, this month you've done too much. And then my mates, my family. So it's making sure you got people to check in on you. So there's 2 narratives here. You sit in a cave and you toil away with ideas, but if you step back immediately, well, the cave is dark and negative. Why are you not on a rocket naked, going through space, being happy? So like the frame of mind of how you approach the task it's just so critical. I think one of my heroes is Ernest Shackleton, you know, the Antarctic explorer.
Yeah.
And if you read his journals, you know, they crash on the ice and they get off and play soccer. You know, they don't sit there and cry about how they're stuck in Antarctica and 100 years ago. So like how you approach these and the frame that you picture yourself is so critical to making sure that persistence and the grit maintain. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that's really, really helpful for anyone. I want to kind of transition now and talk about, you know, your own journey of, you know, both we've talked about that startup phase, but I think, you know, and before we hit record, you're kind of on that verge of that scale up phase, I guess you'd call it now, in that business growth trajectory. So, you know, what's the new challenges? So you've kind of talked about some of the startup challenges. So now as you're Maybe paint a picture first about like what scale up looks like potentially for you. Like where is the business and where are you taking it? And what are some of the new challenges that have come up now?
Easy to paint from our perspective is the size of our customers. So being B2B enterprise, we were doing $10,000 to $20,000 deals over 2 or 3 months. Now, on the table on our pipeline at the moment, there's multiple $1 million deals or $500,000 deals, but they close a lot longer. So cash flow has actually gotten harder, even though we're earning more, because of the instability of the regular smaller deals. So that's why we hired the head of sales to keep things ticking over. So that's one of the challenges, is just the pipeline of the size of the contracts. So, managing that. Outside of that is the, just logistical things. Having meetings in the US at 4 a.m, just because of the time zones, because of the projects over there. And then in the evening in the UK, you're up till 10. So just stuff like that you probably don't factor in. You have a meeting and think, oh, great, got a deal, it's in the UK. Then all of a sudden you're up late, you're up early, that can drain you until you get the more resourcing for more staff. And so that's a juggle and the scale up to startup of identifying the resourcing and infrastructure to support the sales pipeline as it month to month lines up. That's been a new learning curve of how to manage that, because it's exciting, but at the same time you have nothing until they sign these contracts. So, setting that up and then positioning that for the growth has been a really good learning opportunity.
So you're based, your company's now expanded into a few different countries, regions in the world. So you're still based here on the Sunshine Coast. I assume occasionally you need to travel and so forth. But can you give us a picture of what that looks like? So Bundle of Rays, no longer just a startup here on the sunny coast. What does it look like today?
Yeah, so I live up in Buderim. I work from home mostly, but we literally are scouting out offices at the moment. So we're working with the Sunshine Coast Council. We're doing their Testing Tech in Paradise program. So I'm literally working out of Town Hall at the moment in partnership with the council. So we're looking at our growth locally. I've got staff in and around the coast, but also Melbourne and whatnot. We've got consultants globally, our head of product, our head of learnings in Canada. So we've got a global team. But, we do see, I did a tour of Afghanistan. I've worked in Mosul, Iraq, during the ISIS. I've worked in Mexico, Norway, Africa. I've traveled a lot in my life. And the Sunshine Coast, it's got a lot to give. I live near the rainforest. It's 10 minutes to the beach. It's an hour to an international airport, 15 minutes to a domestic airport. It's got all this digital infrastructure, Wi-Fi 6, everything that's coming in. So, it's from a scale-up perspective, access is pretty amazing. So I don't see us leaving here in the short term, which is good.
Are there any challenges or maybe things that you'd like to see come to the Sunshine Coast or to happen on the Sunshine Coast to better support businesses, whether they be at startup or scale-up levels?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work, and building communities is always hard, but the growth is here on the coast. And, the next DC submarine cable and Google having an office, and, I think you had CJ and Forward Fest, and the council's trying to build a $20 million hub, and there's all these things going on. But again, if I started a business next week, what does that mean for them? It's a little bit like Jenny on the ward, right? How does that touch them on the shoulder? The last thing they need is an accelerator program for 6 weeks that doesn't have outcomes for them, because it's just wasted their time. They should just be focused on sales. So the measurable KPI of innovation, of what does this actually achieve? And that's why someone like Ron Hill, and I think you had Colin Graham on here as well. Yeah, I did a little program with them, and if there's one thing that Ron is pretty passionate about is seeing actionable things occur. Which I have definitely learnt from him. So to answer your question, I think there's a lot of good people here. There's a lot of good ideas towards programs, and I think the growth will come. But tying that in for startups and founders that brings them real world growth, which is hard. There's a lot of different industries. That's what I'd love to see. And again, if I get into a position, I'd love to be able to turn that in. The nursing sector is just absolutely... I have to try not to be too opinionated about this, but...
you can be. It's a safe space.
Yeah, it's a safe space. Innovation in nursing is just... It just doesn't happen. Jenny on the ward just works overtime and she's tired and there's burnout and, and the mobilization of ideas just gets stopped every left, right and centre. So I'd love to be able to have some kind of entrepreneurship program within nursing. Like currently I'm trying to organise a think tank around artificial intelligence. So the truth is that the professional body in nursing is the Australian Nursing College, and they put out a position statement on artificial intelligence last year. And you just sort of look at that and you go, you don't use any AI at all in your business. So it's just a regulatory kind of position. And when you look around the nursing industry, there's no test beds, there's no pilots, there's no testing of innovation. Where does that happen? How does that happen? And that's something I think is just absolutely ripe for very smart nurses who are very committed to change and benefits to their patients to be able to put their ideas into some kind of platform that impacts the industry where government, academia and industry work together to make change. There's a lot of internal activities within Queensland Health, but it's so hard for industry to be involved. They just see us as a vendor trying to sell something, when really some of the products we have could transform their business. So those relationships and those kind of, entrepreneurial, I hate that kind of word, but it's mobilising the ideas with actionable projects that could benefit industry. I'd love to see that in nursing. And I'd love to see nursing leadership do that. But at present, it's like being in the desert looking at the sand dunes of activity around technology in particular. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. It's a bit of a buzzword, I think, in business and the startup, ecosystem of, disruption or those disruptors, right? Being those crazy ones on the fringe, that are trying to make a difference in a certain space. In a way, you're kind of playing that role in Bundle of Rays. Why do you say that that's important? I'm assuming you think that's important. Why is it important that there are these disruptors in industries, whether it be health, nursing, or anything in other industries as well? Like, what role do those people who are, I guess, brave enough to step out and try and change the status quo? Why is that important?
Oh, I'm going to be opinionated here again.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
That's why I asked you the question.
Academia drives change in healthcare predominantly, evidence-based. What's the research say? Well, the truth is these academics, they work 9 to 5. They get paid pretty good. There's no risk for them. And you could do a PhD in virtual reality and have never worn a headset because they're just researchers. So, the disruption from my angle is I've been an academic. I've worked as an academic. And I have contextually and entirely put my neck out because I quit my job and I started a business to try and prove the innovation. Academics would never do that. And that disruption, sometimes the frustrations I get is that they don't recognise the level of risk that I've taken to try and prove these ideas to better the industry. And it's not probably them personally, it's the academic industry saying, no, that's not going to happen. It's like, well, hang on a minute, you're not going to do it. These people out here are doing it. Yeah, they might be commercial and they're trying to sell, but it's what they're selling is transformational for the industry. And they can measure it and, all of that. So how industry and academia work together. And then, of course, you've got like Queensland Health and New South Wales, big government systems, procurement programs, that's the concrete, right? How do you get into the concrete? So if you're not kicking sand up at people, I said the words before, institutional inertia. People were just going to keep cruising through, and then the level of followership in healthcare is huge. So there'll be some doctors who do something and they'll talk at some conference and people go, this person, we should adopt that program. Well, where are the adopters? Why are we looking for just key figures? And I think if we could drive more adopters and more testers, that's what I'm trying to champion, is that disruption of saying, what's the risk in giving some things a go? So I think why disrupt? It's to stop the institutional inertia. I can be in simulation centres talking about extended reality simulation. It's a $500 headset with maybe, let's say $50,000 worth of software. And I'll have someone look me in the eye and go, it's pretty expensive, man. But we're standing in a multi-million-dollar sim centre with mannequins that cost $200,000. And there's like this fog of like, do you not see this? You know, like this is the status quo. And yes, what we're doing here doesn't entirely replicate this, but if you reduce that footprint by 30% and adopted some of this, you'd be saving millions at scale.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I think institutional inertia is the real thing in healthcare and academia that I just want to, you know, put my hand up and stop. Say, come on, let's have a bit of a look around.
Yeah. One of the things you said there I'm going to hook into is you talked about, you know, bringing those adopters on board or the importance of those adopters when you're disrupting, right? And I think you kind of painted that picture really well in your particular story of without those adopters, you potentially don't get traction in your disruption, right? And I think, you know, that's potentially something that others can take away who are trying to disrupt in wherever they are, you know, or whatever industry they are, is seeking out and building relationships with those adopters, those people who kind of, you know, want to come on that journey and see what you're doing and can be those that conduit into the bigger system, right? Would you say that that's been some of your secret is trying to get some of those adopters, you know, on your bus? I don't know if bus is the right term, but, you know.
Yeah, well, champions of the ideas, yeah. And they might not always entirely love the products either, but they know that it adds benefits to the current status quo. And if you look at rural and remote medicine, you know, virtual reality isn't a magic bullet, but at the moment you've got some nursing educators that are driving 2 or 2.5 hours to a hospital to train 3 people and then staying in a hotel and then driving back. And when you have a look at the logistics of what goes on out in rural and remote, there's huge costs. So, and ultimately it's just getting people in front of each other and equipment. And you just sort of think, well, there has to be better solutions. And not only that, they lack staff. You know, people left, right and centre, you know, stay for 6 months and then leave again. So it's this sort of vicious cycle out west of how to maintain consistency and equitable quality to metro areas. So, yeah, that's the champions out there can see the benefits. And, yeah, we also try and get we're talking about building a community of practice now of these adopters to sort of help build the use cases and the ideas because healthcare just see us as a vendor, sell like a hawker, you know, hey, buy my shit, you know. Whereas if we have a community of practice of nurses and academics saying, you know, we use this and we found this to be good and we found that to be bad, it helps to mitigate that feeling that I'm hawking some product into the industry, because that's sort of how healthcare sees sales.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that. That's good. Let's just as we start to wrap up here, Brad, I'm interested in your kind of bigger picture view of this technology that you're deep into of XR and AR, and I guess VR as well, right? And it probably works in AI as well. All of these acronyms. You know, where's this going? So I know the technology has been a thing for a while now. It's becoming something that's being more adopted. Like you say, AI much more widely adopted, but you know, XR, VR technologies are becoming more adopted slowly. Where's this going though? Let's say in the next 5 years, like, do you see this as being like everywhere and kind of ubiquitous, or is it further down the field, down the track than that, or where's the industry going?
It's fundamental change, like true core industry change, and AI really is a driver for that. So the two buckets here. That's extended realities, AR, VR, mixed reality, whatever. That's the context, right? Context. AI is the work that you can do. So you put a headset on, you go to a place and you have context, and then the AI will be there getting the work done. So the easy example for an industry like nursing is very vocational. So you do a 3-year nursing degree, you might have 140 core skills, do a blood pressure, you know, use a stethoscope. The truth is, today, you can talk to an avatar and have a conversation and, yeah, good morning, sir, how are you? Oh, you got a bit of chest pain, okay. It can give you a sentiment score today of your communication skills.
And that's the AI?
That's the AI. But you're talking to a photorealistic person, and when you look around, you're in a hospital. So that's the XR component. That can happen today. The other thing that can happen today is retinal tracking and biometric sensing. So it's expensive at the moment, but you look around and it will know how often you've looked at the patient. You know, did you look at the blood pressure cuff, and did you look at the monitor? And so there's an absolute array of objective data points in these environments: hand positioning, head positioning, etc. So in 5 years, I see nursing as when you graduate from your degree, you'll have a digital wallet of your skills. And those skills will be objectively scored at graduation for when you go for a job interview. So Queensland Health would say, all right, there's 1,000 new graduates that are coming to our work. Here, let's look at their digital wallets, and it'll say they scored 70 on physical assessment. And it's just completely objective because it's, did they put their hand in the right spot? Did they translate the data? So from a skills perspective, it'll just...
Yeah, that's game changing.
It's the same as being an electrician. Like you need to do a fuse box, or like it'll transform all forms of education that are vocational because the skills will be wrapped up. And the context here is that aviation have done this for 20 years. Like if you're a check captain training pilots, they do a simulator. They do it in the rain, they do it in the wind, and what do? They get a score. And they have to do that every year for proficiency. So just that now the technology's moved along so much, we can do it for nursing and doctors and electricians and plumbers. So I think it's transformational change.
Yeah.
Like imagine being able to practice a conversation to a patient that's been palliative and they're dying, and you have to talk to them about their death and what they need.
You can't really practice that.
No.
Can you?
Well, now you can.
Yeah, you can now. Yeah.
So we have photorealistic avatars with AI that we can build, and have that conversation when you're in a palliative care environment. So like if we can do that today, what's the tech going to be able to do in 5 years around those kind of skills? So, some people call them soft skills, but probably better to be communication or behavior type training. So if you have them and hard skills like practical, and you match them together with a dashboard of scores, to me, that completely and utterly changes the industry.
Yeah, there's no doubt. To me, like what came up straight away there is this, it's kind of like the dilemma with self-driving vehicles, right? Where the technology exists, but what potentially is holding it back from mass adoption is the legislation and the institutional kind of roadblocks, which is the case with like self-driving cars, I feel anyway, But I assume with some of these developments in technology that a lot of the technology already exists in education for healthcare. But the challenge, as you've mentioned, is on getting the institutions to, I guess, accept it or allow that to be the, accepted method of training, do you think?
This is even some of the strangest part of it is that I'll talk to, national universities and CEOs of healthcare systems, and they won't even put the headset on. So you sort of like, fundamentally, how are we going to change the industry with technology if leaders within the industry don't deep dive extensively into what it is and how it works and, driving the use cases there. So it's up to people like me to keep kicking sand around the sandpit saying, hey, guys, you should look over here.
Yeah.
So there's some of the challenges. So
yeah.
Yeah. But
it's changing the perception, isn't it? Like there is, I think, and we talked about this before we hit record here, that some of the perception for, those who are slower to adopt technologies, if they have worn a headset in some way, they feel that it's a game or it's cartoony or it's not really got that practical real world application. But that's not the case. Like I think, that's digging your head in the sand,
It was probably just not being aware of the use cases, right? Like you can put a headset on and sit on a roller coaster. You can do that. But you can also, put a headset on and save a soldier in a military conflict and put in a chest drain. So like just getting their heads in headsets to see the possibilities is tricky, but we'll get there. We're slowly, I haven't gone bankrupt yet, and we've got a pretty good little growth pathway for 2025 on the horizon. So, as challenging as, cash flow and staff and the pains of scale up come, we see an extremely positive view towards what we can do. And, we're working with some low middle income countries now. We've got Sri Lanka, we've got some sales in Mexico and India. We've got our office in Korea. So I'll be damned if I ever thought that I started my nursing degree and I'd be running a global business. It's wild. That's some wild shit right there, Ben.
Well done. It's a hell of a story, and I think a really good story that those of us in business on the Sunshine Coast, we should be following along. So, I do encourage people who are watching or listening and interested to see what you guys are doing to kind of follow Bundle of Rays and connect with you. So what's the best place? Like, do you share you share content? Do you share the story out there so that others can kind of come on that journey with you?
I try. I wish I was better at that. My LinkedIn is where I usually go to. We've got a lot of our user base there. Facebook and Instagram, do some stuff there. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm quite active. I'm literally trying to organise an event on the Sunshine Coast in July, August, which is a think tank for the nursing industry. So we've had an event here in the past called Explore. So it's kind of a secondary brand that we have around innovation. So, if we have some events, it'd be great to see some, other startups in the region come and they can pitch their products and their services at these sort of innovation events that we do. But yeah, otherwise on LinkedIn, and I do like a wine and a beer down at Alex Surf Club. I'm pretty approachable. So if people just want to hang out and have a chat, it depends if my wife gives me the time off. But I'm around.
Yeah, awesome, Brad. Well, I look forward to, other people who have listened or enjoyed this episode to connecting with you and collaborating and being part of that community that's kind of lifting up what you're doing, a bundle of rays, and in return, growing what they're doing on the coast as well, right? I think, everything's better when we work together.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and, I think I'd love to be able to work with other companies to see them grow. It's hard, but it's pretty rewarding to see what you can do.
Well, thanks for joining me on the show, Brad. I'm really excited to kind of see where you go through 2025 and beyond, taking over the world.
Hopefully not in the cave, hopefully on the rocket. We'll see.
On the
see
rocket.
What happens.
Yeah, let's see it.
Cool.
All right, and for you guys watching and listening, hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode of the Coast and Commerce podcast. Connect with Brad Chesham on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place, as he said. And let us know what you thought of this episode. Leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or reach out to us at Innovate Media and let us know what value you're getting from this podcast. Take care. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.